It was a family dinner, a typical one. But I'll never forget that night. We were all sitting at the table, the smell of roasted chicken hanging thick in the air, glasses of wine clinking together, and the usual chatter filling the room. Lisa, my wife, sat beside me, her smile warm as always. My son-in-law, Ryan, was across from me, fidgeting with his wine glass, avoiding eye contact. There was something in his demeanor that felt off, something I couldn't quite place, but it gnawed at me. And then it happened. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you set your listening from. You said her unstable, Ryan said, his voice flat, almost like he was commenting on the weather. I don't know how you can even function like this. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The room froze. All the sounds, the laughter, the clinking of silverware died in an instant. Lisa's face turned pale, her eyes shifting between me and Ryan, but she didn't speak. No one did. My mouth went dry, and for a moment I couldn't even process what he'd just said. What? I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan leaned back, casually sipping his wine, as if he hadn't just dropped a bombshell. You stare fine most of the time, but been around long enough to see the cracks, he said, his words cutting through the silence. I think you stare just hiding it. I don't trust it. I looked at Lisa, hoping for her to jump in, to defend me, but she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. My mind raced. How could he say this? In front of everyone? It was like he had set a trap, and I had fallen right into it. But it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, casual, as if this was an accepted truth, as if my entire life, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was suddenly in question. Ryan. That sip's not necessary, Lisa finally said, her voice shaky. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. It wasn't just a comment, it was a weapon, and now it had taken root in the one place I never thought it would. My own family. I could feel it, like an invisible wall growing between me and Lisa. It was like she was starting to see me through Ryan's eyes, questioning every moment, every conversation. Days passed, but the distance didn't shrink. If anything, it grew. Lisa began pulling away. Not drastically, but enough that I noticed. The glances, the hesitant pauses when we spoke. It was like I was no longer the man she trusted. Slowly I could feel the suspicion building, and all because of a casual accusation. I tried to brush it off. I tried to convince myself it was just me being paranoid, but then I found it. A note. It was sitting on the kitchen counter one morning, almost placed deliberately where I'd find it. Handwritten in Ryan's unmistakable scrawl. It said, I'm worried about Dad. He's been acting strangely. We need to keep an eye on him. He could be a danger to himself or others. We can't just ignore this. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a careless remark. It was a campaign, a calculated attack. Ryan had turned my own daughter against me, and now I was being portrayed as a danger, a threat. I stood there for a long time, staring at the note, the room around me spinning. This wasn't just a family quarrel. This was bigger, far bigger, and it was happening right under my nose. My own flesh and blood, conspiring to ruin my reputation. The betrayal stung deeper than I ever imagined possible. This wasn't just about being accused of something I didn't do. It was about losing the trust of the people I loved most, losing my family. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The days following that moment were a blur. Lisa's doubts were growing. She'd ask if I was okay, her voice dripping with uncertainty, and each time she did, I could feel another piece of my dignity slipping away. The man she had known for years, the man she had married, was suddenly someone she wasn't sure she could trust, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. I couldn't just sit there and let this happen. I couldn't let Ryan tear apart everything I had worked for. My reputation, my stability, my peace of mind. They were all on the line. And for what? Because Ryan wanted control? I knew then what I had to do. I had to fight back. But how? How could I convince Lisa, convince the rest of the family that Ryan was lying, that I wasn't the unstable one, he was? I couldn't do it yet. Not until I had proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. The plan started to form. I would gather evidence. I'd track down every lie, every inconsistency. I'd show Lisa the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The question was, how far was I willing to go to expose Ryan? How much of my family's trust could I lose before it was all over? One thing was clear. I wasn't going down without a fight. The next few days felt like I was drowning. Every time I opened my eyes, I felt like the world around me was slipping further away, out of my control. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken words, heavy with tension. I could feel it. Lisa's hesitation, the subtle shift in her demeanor. She no longer looked at me the same way. It was as if a crack had formed in our relationship, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't patch it up. She set to ask questions. Questions that cut deeper than I ever thought possible. Are you sure you starch okay, Christian? It was a simple question, but the way she asked it so softly, almost like she was testing the waters, felt like a direct attack on my sanity. Was I okay? Of course I was. I had always been the calm one, the stable one, the rock for everyone around me. I had spent years serving my country, fighting battles that left scars, but never once did I doubt my own mental clarity. Yet here I was, at home, with my own wife, questioning my stability. The seed Ryan had planted had grown into a tree of doubt, and now Lisa was starting to see the world through his lens. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence deafening. I could hear Lisa's soft breathing beside me, but I couldn't feel the comfort I once did. She was there, but she wasn't with me. I started to wonder if anyone was. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Every word from Lisa, every glance from her, made me question myself. What if Ryan was right? What if I wasn't as stable as I thought? The fear began to worm its way inside me, and I couldn't shake it. I couldn't remember the last time I felt truly secure, truly sure of myself. The thought of therapy crossed my mind more than once. I needed to know, needed to be sure that I was still the man I believed myself to be. So I made the call. I reached out to my military psychiatrist, someone I trusted, someone who had seen me at my worst and never once questioned my mental clarity. I needed that reassurance. I needed him to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The appointment came quickly. The office smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the walls were lined with military memorabilia, a silent reminder of the years I had spent in service. I sat across from Dr. Simmons, my psychiatrist, feeling like I was a soldier walking into battle again. This time the battlefield wasn't a foreign land, it was my mind. "How have you been feeling?" he asked. His voice steady, calm. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I sat struggling. I admitted, the words leaving me heavier than I expected. "It seeps like I can set breathe anymore. Lisa Sepp's starting to believe the things Ryan Sepp's been saying about me. I don't set know how to make it stop." Dr. Simmons didn't flinch. He didn't raise an eyebrow or show any sign of doubt. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting mine. "Christian, I've worked with you for a long time, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that you are as mentally sound as anyone I've ever worked with. What you're going through, this feeling of losing control, is normal when you're under attack, but it doesn't mean you're unstable." His words were a lifeline, a small, fragile thread that I clung to. But even as the words sank in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The doubt still lingered, gnawing at me like a constant presence. The world was telling me I was crazy, telling me I couldn't trust myself. And even though I knew deep down that wasn't true, it felt real. It felt like the walls were closing in, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The worst part, Lisa wasn't with me. She was starting to pull further away, slipping from my grasp like sand through my fingers. I could see it in her eyes, the subtle shift, the way she'd hesitate before speaking to me. The affection was gone. All I had left was a shell of the life I once knew. I had to do something. I couldn't let Ryan win. I couldn't let him destroy me. But as I sat there thinking about the weeks to come, the mounting evidence against me, I realized something that made my stomach churn. I was losing more than just my reputation. I was losing my family. And that was something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. The days felt like weeks, and each one bled into the next. The weight of what Ryan had done, what he had started, pressed down on me every waking moment. I could feel the grip tightening, the pressure building. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't just sit back and watch my life disintegrate in front of me, piece by piece. Lisa, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes whenever she looked at me. She was caught in the middle, her loyalty to her family pulling her one way, and her love for me pulling her the other. I knew she wanted to believe me, wanted to stand by me, but Ryan's lies were like a cancer, eating away at her trust in me. I had to be smart. I had to plan. I couldn't confront Ryan directly. Not yet. Not until I had the evidence to back up every word I said. Until I had something concrete, something irrefutable. But I was going to get it. I had to. That's when I made the decision. I needed to meet with Dr. Simmons again. This time, not just for reassurance, but to document everything. I needed every shred of proof that my mental state was intact. That I was, in fact, the most stable person in the room. I met him at his office again, the familiar smell of antiseptic and leather chairs greeting me like an old friend. This time I wasn't just asking for reassurance, I was asking for evidence. Dr. Simmons. I started, my voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. I need your help. I need a full report on my mental clarity, on everything we've discussed in our sessions. I need something that can prove that I'm not losing it, that I'm not this unstable person my son-in-law is painting me to be. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression neutral. Christian, you know I've always been honest with you, and I've never seen any signs of instability. But you want something official, something that can stand up in court, don't you? Yes, I said, my voice firm. I need that report. I need something that says, without a doubt, that I am mentally sound. Because if I don't have it, Ryan wins, and I can let that happen. Dr. Simmons paused for a moment, then nodded. I shall make sure it sets thorough. It will take a few days, but I shall get it done. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. I had my first piece of evidence. I was going to collect more, everything I could. Text messages, receipts, even the smallest of things that could back up my story. Ryan's lies were about to come crumbling down, and I was going to be the one to expose them. Back home, I began to gather everything. I scrolled through my phone, saving any texts from Lisa that hinted at her doubts, the ones that made it clear she was starting to listen to Ryan. I wasn't sure if it was fair, if it would hurt her, but I had to be prepared. I had to show her that I wasn't the one who was losing control. It was Ryan manipulating her, poisoning her thoughts against me. I began recording conversations. Subtle, innocent exchanges at first, just to get a feel for the kind of things Ryan might slip up on. The tension in the house was palpable now. Lisa was still there, but she was distant, as if she didn't fully trust me anymore. "How's your day going?" I asked her. One evening, my tone light, casual, she answered, but her response was more clipped than usual. There was an unease about her that I hadn't seen before. "Fine," she said, her eyes avoiding mine as she looked down at her phone. I didn't push it. I knew it wasn't the time, but each interaction, each subtle shift in her behavior felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. And I was determined to complete it. The next step was getting more direct. I needed to talk to some of the family, anyone who would listen. I had to start planting seeds, just small ones, to see if anyone else had noticed what Ryan was doing. But I had to be careful. I couldn't give myself away. I had to play the long game, take it slow. One wrong move and I'd be exposed, and Ryan would have the upper hand. I started with my brother Jeff. He'd always been a little skeptical of Ryan. The guy rubbed him the wrong way, and I had a feeling he'd be open to hearing my side of things. We met for coffee one morning at a little cafe in town, a quiet place where no one could overhear us. The conversation started easy, as it always did. We talked about sports, work, the weather, nothing heavy. But then I slid it in just as casually as Ryan had thrown his accusation at me. "You know, Lisa Sip's been a little distant lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "I think Sip's been worried about me, but I can figure out why. It Sip's like she doesn't trust me anymore." Jeff looked up from his coffee, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean? You've always been the rock man. No one could ever say anything about you." "Yeah, that's just what I thought," I said, keeping my face neutral. But lately She-Sipt has been acting strange, like She-Sipt is listening to Ryan more than me. He-Sipt has been saying things about me, trying to make her think I'd been unstable. I don't Siptus know why, but I Siptus starting to feel like He-Sipt is trying to tear us apart. Jeff Sepp's eyes narrowed. That doesn't sound right. Ryan Sepp's always been a little off. You think He-Sep's really doing that? I don't know, I replied, keeping my voice calm. But I Sepp's starting to think it Sepp's more than just a little issue. I think he's Sepp's trying to control things, and I can Sepp's just sit back and let him. Jeff didn't say anything for a while. His eyes still focused on me. I still keep an eye out, he finally said. But you Stepper right. Something Sepper's wrong with him. And I don't think it Seppers you. It was a small win, but it felt like a huge step in the right direction. At least someone else was starting to see it. But this was just the beginning. I still needed more. I needed everything I could gather before the final confrontation. I wasn't just fighting for my reputation anymore. I was fighting for my family, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The next phase of my plan was all about subtlety. I couldn't go charging in demanding justice. If I wanted to expose Ryan for the manipulative liar he was, I had to make sure every step was measured, every action deliberate. The worst thing I could do now was make a rash move. Patience was the key, and I had learned over the years to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I began to plant seeds of doubt in the most casual ways. Nothing too obvious, nothing that would alert Ryan to the fact that I was on to him. He didn't need to know I was watching, listening, gathering evidence. The more he thought he was in control, the better. It made him reckless. It started at family gatherings. Lisa and I went to a few parties, birthdays, anniversaries, and there was Ryan, always acting like the perfect son-in-law, charming everyone around him, making sure to get the attention he so clearly craved. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching the reactions of others, especially Lisa. She'd glance at him with that uncertain look in her eyes, and I knew that deep down she was starting to question everything he'd told her. At one party, I casually brought up my mental state in front of Lisa, just as I had planned. We were sitting around the kitchen table, sipping wine with some of the extended family. The conversation drifted to work, then to stress, and that's when I dropped it. You know, stress can really mess with your head, I said lightly, glancing over at Lisa. I've been doing fine, but sometimes I wonder if I end carrying more weight than I realize. Ryan Sips got me thinking about it lately. He keeps saying I Sips unstable. I wasn't expecting much of a response. Just a quiet acknowledgement from Lisa, maybe a soft laugh to brush it off. But I caught the subtle shift in Ryan's expression. He stiffened, his eyes flicking to Lisa. He didn't say a word, but I saw the panic in his gaze. For the first time, I could see the cracks in his armor. He was nervous. Lisa Sepsta's eyes were fixed on me now, her expression unreadable. You stirred not unstable, she said, her voice a little too firm. We just need to talk about things more, that Sepsta's all. I smiled, but it didn't feel good. It felt like a trap. The tension between us was palpable. I could feel the weight of her words. Was she just trying to reassure herself? Or was she really starting to believe Ryan's lies? I had to push it further. I had to see how far I could go without exposing myself. So over the next few weeks, I made sure to mention my instability in passing just to see how Ryan would react. I was careful, keeping it subtle. Each time I did, I watched his face, studying every flicker of emotion that crossed it. I started to see patterns in his reactions. He would always deflect, trying to turn the conversation back to me, asking if I was okay or suggesting that maybe I needed some time to clear my head. The more he did it, the more I realized how much he feared the truth coming out. He was trying to control the narrative, and the more I exposed his lies, the more desperate he became. One evening, while we were all gathered for dinner, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of just dropping hints, I went for something more direct, though still subtle. We were all sitting around the table, eating, talking about nothing in particular, when I turned to Ryan and said, "You know, it's funny. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been through a lot, and somehow I'm still standing. I don't know if that makes me strong or just stubborn." Ryan shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to Lisa before quickly looking away. "Well, stubbornness isn't always a bad thing," he said, his voice tight. I mean, you Sep always been like that, right? There it was again. The deflection, the attempt to downplay my words, to make it seem like I was the one with the problem. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Yeah, maybe, I replied, my voice casual. But sometimes I think stubbornness can make a person blind to the truth. Maybe that sips why some people can see things the way they really are. They sips too busy trying to protect their own version of the story. I could see the tension in Ryan's shoulders. He was trying to keep it together, but it was clear he was starting to crack. I had him on edge now. Every word I said, every conversation I slipped into, was pushing him closer to the edge. Over the next few days, I began to gather more evidence. I knew Ryan's paranoia would grow, and as it did, he'd make mistakes. He was already nervous, already acting out of character. I could feel the pressure mounting, and I was ready to exploit it. I also kept my eyes on Lisa. I had to keep her close, make her see the truth without pushing her too hard. She was still in denial, still trying to balance her love for me with her loyalty to her family. But it was getting harder for her to ignore the cracks in Ryan's story. I started to have private conversations with her, careful, indirect ones, where I made sure she understood I wasn't the one who had changed. I was still the man she married, the man she trusted. It was Ryan who had manipulated the situation, twisted the truth, and tried to tear us apart. But even as I saw the doubt begin to creep into her eyes, I knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Ryan was about to realize that his plan was unraveling. And when that moment came, there would be no turning back. The tension in the house had become unbearable. Every room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to crack, and I could feel it in every conversation, in every glance between Lisa and Ryan. The cracks I had noticed before were widening, and I was no longer the only one who saw them. Ryan was beginning to realize that I wasn't going to let him get away with this. The more I pushed, the more desperate his reactions became. I started meeting with more family members. Not just Jeff anymore, but others who I knew might be on the fence, who hadn't fully bought into Ryan's narrative. It was delicate work. I couldn't expose myself yet, couldn't let them know the full extent of my plans, but I needed them to start seeing the truth. At one of these meetings, I invited my cousin Mark over for drinks. He'd always been close with Lisa and me, and I had a sense he might be more sympathetic to my side of things. We sat on the back porch, the warm evening air thick with the smell of the barbecue cooking nearby. You know, man, I said, casually taking a sip of my drink, it sips funny how people can twist things, how easy it is for someone to make you look like the villain when you sip you're just trying to do the right thing. Mark raised an eyebrow, sensing that there was more to this than just small talk. What do you mean? Well, I continued, keeping my tone light. I've been having some issues with Ryan lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's been getting a little too comfortable with his opinions about me. And lately, he's been telling Lisa that I'm not mentally stable. It's all just strange, you know? But I guess people see what they want to see, especially when they've got their own agenda. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I haven't really noticed anything, he admitted, taking another sip of his beer. But Ryan Sepp's always been a bit intense. It's Sepp's just how he is. Yeah, I replied, my voice low, but there's a difference between being intense and trying to destroy someone's life. He's been planting these seeds, Mark, making Lisa question me, making her think I'm unstable. And now it's getting out of hand. It's not just between me and him anymore. It's affecting everything. Mark didn't answer immediately. He sat there, looking at me, the weight of my words sinking in. He finally broke the silence. I know Ryan can be a little much sometimes, but are you sure it's all him? You know Lisa loves you, Christian. She might just be worried about everything. I nodded, though inside I was burning. I know she loves me, Mark, but she's been influenced, and I can just stand by and let it happen. I need people to see it for what it is. This isn't about her worrying about me. It's about him manipulating her, and I need to stop it before he wins. Mark didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't fully convinced yet, but I had planted the seed. Now I just needed time to let it grow. Meanwhile, Ryan's paranoia was getting worse. I could see it in every conversation, in the way he tried to control the narrative. The cracks in his story were starting to show. He was becoming more defensive, more desperate to maintain his control. I was pushing him further into a corner, and every time he deflected or avoided a question, he was only digging himself deeper. Lisa was still on the fence, caught between loyalty and doubt, but I could see the shift in her. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was enough. I could tell she was beginning to question Ryan's motives. Little things, like how she no longer defended him automatically, how she hesitated before agreeing with him, told me that she was starting to see the inconsistencies. She was just waiting for the right moment to confront him, and I could feel it. The tension between us was palpable, but I knew it was only a matter of time. The next step in my plan was crucial. I had to start showing the family more of Ryan's true nature without exposing myself completely. I had to create doubt in his mind, push him to reveal his hand. I had to make him believe I was the one losing control while I remained the calm, methodical one. And to do that, I started using the one thing Ryan couldn't control: his own behavior. One evening we had another family gathering, and as always, Ryan was the center of attention, trying to keep everyone entertained with his charm and wit. But I was watching him closely, waiting for my moment. It came when he made a joke, one that crossed the line, something about me being out of touch, about how I was old-fashioned. It wasn't funny, and no one laughed. But it was clear he was trying to undermine me in front of everyone. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my eyes steady. "Funny," I said, my voice even eyes set. I'd always thought of myself as a man of principle. Maybe that's why I don't get the jokes. Some people find funny. Ryan's face stiffened, but he quickly recovered, trying to brush it off with another laugh. But it was too late. I had made my point. I had planted the seed of doubt, and I knew it would start growing in the minds of everyone around us. Later that evening, as the gathering was winding down, I caught Lisa in the hallway. She was about to head upstairs when I stopped her. "Lisa," I said, my voice low but steady, "I know you stir confused right now, but I need you to know something. What Ryan Seb's doing isn't just about me. It's about control. He wants to control everything, including you. He's trying to turn us against each other, and I won't let him do that." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment I thought she might turn away, but then something in her eyes shifted. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Christian, but I will think about what you said." It was all I could ask for. It was the opening I needed. Lisa wasn't ready to fully confront Ryan yet, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, and that was a victory in itself. Ryan had made his first mistake. He had underestimated me, and now the walls were closing in on him. He was running out of time. The closer we got to Christmas, the more I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The tension at home was unbearable, thick enough to cut through with a knife. Lisa's behavior had changed again. There was a distance between us, but it wasn't the same as before. She wasn't as dismissive anymore. She wasn't as sure about Ryan, and that gave me hope. But I knew I had to push a little further, just enough to tip the scales. Ryan, on the other hand, had become increasingly paranoid. I could see it in the way he carried himself. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by an almost desperate need to control every conversation. He was trying too hard, slipping up in ways he never had before. His deflections were getting more transparent, his attempts to manipulate more obvious. He was running out of time, and I could feel the walls closing in on him. That was when I decided to ramp things up. Subtlety had worked so far, but now it was time to make my move. I had to push Lisa to confront Ryan without pushing her too hard. She needed to see him for who he really was. She needed to see the truth, even if it hurt. It was a cold Friday evening when I decided to take the next step. Lisa and I were in the living room, sitting in the silence that had become our new normal. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. My mind was elsewhere, calculating, planning. I turned to her, carefully considering my words. "Lisa, I know things have been hard between us lately. I don't want to keep pushing, but there's been something you need to understand." She glanced at me, her eyes wary but soft. "I know," she said quietly. "I just trying to figure it all out, Christian. Everything's been so confusing. I know it's hard, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. But you have to understand that Ryan isn't just worried about me. He's trying to manipulate you. He's been poisoning everything we've built, and he's not doing it because he cares about us. He's doing it to control you, to control us. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her gently. I know you don't want to believe that, but it sets the truth. He sets not the person you think he is. Lisette's eyes narrowed, her expression shifting. You don't know what he set's been telling me, Christian. You don't know how it feels to be caught in the middle of all this. I leaned forward, my gaze steady. I understand more than you think. I understand that it's hard to see the truth when someone you love is turning against you. But I need you to trust me, Lisa. I'm not the one who's lying. Ryan is. He's been manipulating you, twisting everything I say. And you have to stop letting him control this. There was a long pause as Lisa looked down at her hands, her fingers gripping the edge of her glass. I could see the conflict in her face, the internal struggle. I didn't push her any further. I just let the silence settle between us, letting her think, letting the doubt sink in. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes searching. I don't know what to think anymore, she whispered, but I still talk to him. I still confront him. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing more I could say. She needed to make that decision on her own, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Ryan wouldn't let go without a fight. He had too much to lose. Over the next few days I kept watching, waiting. I could feel the tension mounting as Christmas Eve approached. I knew the moment was coming. The moment when everything would come to a head. Lisa would confront Ryan, and when she did, everything would change. But Ryan was getting more aggressive, more defensive. His attempts to control the narrative had become more blatant. At one point, I overheard him talking to Lisa on the phone. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the door to the study was slightly open, and I couldn't help but listen in. I don't should know what you Sept are thinking, Lisa. Ryan Sep's voice was low and urgent, but you need to stop listening to him. He Sep's manipulating you just like he Sep's been manipulating everyone else. You can Sept trust him. Lisa Sip's voice was calm but firm. I Sip's not going to keep fighting about this, Ryan. I need space to think. Ryan Sep's tone hardened. Fine, but just know, if you side with him, you set you're siding with the enemy. You set you're making a huge mistake. I could hear the strain in his voice, the fear. He was losing control, and he knew it. He knew that Christmas Eve, the moment I had been waiting for, was fast approaching. The final confrontation was coming, and no matter how hard he tried, no matter how much he fought, the truth would come out. I sat there in the study, the weight of the situation settling over me like a storm cloud. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the tension rising in my veins. I had no idea how this would play out, but I knew one thing for certain. Ryan had no idea what he was about to face. Lisa was getting closer to seeing the truth, and when that moment came, I would be ready. Everything had been building toward this, and no one, least of all Ryan, was going to stop me now. The night was colder than usual, a stark contrast to the warmth of the family home. It was Christmas Eve, and the house was decorated with twinkling lights and the smell of a feast in the oven. Everyone was gathered, laughing, talking, sipping wine and eggnog, but the air felt thick. There was an undercurrent of tension running through the room, and no one, not even Ryan, could hide it. Lisa, my daughter, and everyone else were trying to maintain the usual holiday cheer, but I could see the cracks. They were all waiting for something to happen, and they knew it was coming. Lisa was still torn, her eyes darting between Ryan and me. She hadn't confronted him yet. Not directly, but she was more and more aware of the tension between us. She knew something was wrong, and tonight I was going to make sure she saw it for what it was. I had planned this for months. Every conversation, every text, every interaction, everything I had done had led to this point. The moment of truth was here. Ryan had no idea what was about to happen, and that made it all the more satisfying. I stood in the living room watching my family. My heart was steady, calm. Ryan, on the other hand, was already on edge. his usual charm replaced by an anxious energy I could feel from across the room. He was watching Lisa, watching me, waiting for me to make the first move. And I did. "Lisa," I called out, my voice loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "Could I have a word with you privately?" I kept my voice neutral, but everyone could feel the weight of it. Lisa looked at me, her face a mixture of concern and uncertainty. She didn't know whether to side with me, to confront Ryan, or to stay out of it entirely. She gave a small nod and followed me into the hallway. We stood there, facing each other, just outside the living room. The sounds of the party seemed distant, muffled by the distance between us. "You said you're not the man I married," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't set to know what to believe anymore, Christian." I looked at her, the pain in her eyes cutting deeper than I ever expected. "I know, Lisa, but you've been manipulated. Ryan Sip's been turning you against me. And you Sip seen it, even if you didn't Septa want to admit it. But now you have to face the truth." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Just listen. I'm not going to ask you to choose between us, but I need you to hear me out, tonight. In front of everyone, I'm going to show you the truth. I have the proof, everything I've been telling you. I'm not crazy. I'm not unstable. Ryan is—" Her face paled. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, though every fiber of my being wanted to explode. "I've been collecting evidence. I've recorded our conversations, texts, the things Ryan has said. I've even spoken to people who've seen what he's done. I have the psychiatrist's report, the one you've been questioning. You've been lied to, Lisa, and tonight it all ends." Her breath hitched, and for a moment I thought she might back away, maybe run to Ryan for support, but she didn't. She stood there, her face a mixture of confusion, fear, and something else. Something close to regret. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "I didn't want to think that Ryan would do this." "I know," I said softly. "But he has, and tonight I sup am going to expose everything. We can sup it keep living in this lie." She looked at me, eyes wide with both fear and realization. What if you stepped wrong? What if it steps not him? What if I stepped wrong about all of this?" I took her hands in mine, steadying her. "Lisa, I said never been more sure of anything in my life. He said's been using you to control me, to manipulate everything. But tonight it ends." She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if she were steeling herself for what was to come. I walked back into the living room, Lisa trailing behind me. The room had grown quieter, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. I could feel Ryan's eyes on me, his tense posture betraying the confidence he tried so hard to project. Without saying a word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, displaying a series of text messages between Ryan and me, messages he thought he had deleted. I swiped through them one by one, showing the manipulation, the lies, the way he had slowly turned Lisa against me. "Look at these," I said, my voice steady as I walked toward the family. "These are the messages Ryan has been sending me, trying to convince me that I'm unstable. He's been telling me that I'm losing my mind, making it seem like I'm the problem. But look at the dates. Look at the timestamps. It's all here." I handed the phone to Lisa, who took it in her trembling hands. Her eyes darted over the screen, reading the messages, reading the lies. I watched her face, the horror beginning to sink in. But I wasn't set done. Next, I pulled out the psychiatrist's report, the one Dr. Simmons had prepared for me, with detailed notes about my mental state, everything I needed to prove that I was stable, that I was the sane one in this family. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes flicking nervously between me and the rest of the family. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no way he could talk his way out of it now. "I've been through therapy. I've been through hell, but I'm here, and I'm still standing. I'm not unstable," I said, my voice rising as I addressed everyone in the room. "But Ryan is the one who's been manipulating all of you. He's been trying to tear this family apart, all because he can't stand that I'm in the way." Lisa turned to Ryan, her face a mask of disbelief. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Have you been doing this? Have you been lying to me?" Ryan's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but it was too late. The web had been unraveled, and there was no hiding from the truth. Lisa, I can explain, he stammered, his voice strained. I didn't set want you to see him like this. He set's been difficult, manipulative. He set's the one who set's unstable. You can set's listen to him. But it was no use. The lies were exposed, and the truth had a way of cutting deeper than any words Ryan could muster. The room was silent, the weight of what had just transpired hanging heavily in the air. And there, in that moment, with all eyes on him, Ryan knew his reign of manipulation was over. The aftermath of Christmas Eve left the air in the house cold and suffocating. The festive cheer that had filled the rooms earlier was replaced with an oppressive silence. Ryan was gone. Lisa and I hadn't spoken much after the showdown, and I knew she needed time to process everything. The next few days were a blur of silence, tension, and reflection. I thought things would feel different, that the weight of having finally exposed the truth would bring some relief. But it didn't. Instead, it was as if the house had lost its soul. The cracks in our family were now open wounds, and no amount of cleaning up would erase the damage. I could hear Lisa moving around in the kitchen in the mornings, her footsteps slow and measured like she wasn't sure what to do anymore. The sound of dishes clinking was the only noise in the house, the only thing that seemed to break the stillness. She was still processing, still trying to make sense of everything. I wanted to approach her to talk, but every time I tried, the words felt like they would come out wrong. She wasn't angry with me, not in the way I had expected. She was confused, hurt, and most of all, disappointed. And that hurt more than anything. The day after the confrontation, she came into the living room, her face pale. She sat down next to me on the couch, but she didn't say anything. For a moment, it felt like we were two strangers, both trying to figure out where we stood in this new reality. I didn't want to believe it, she whispered finally, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't want to believe Ryan would do something like this to us. I reached out and touched her hand. I know, I said softly. It sits hard to see the truth when you've been blinded by someone you love. But I never wanted this, Lisa. I never wanted to hurt you. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, trying to find the man she had married, the one she had trusted. I should have seen it sooner, she murmured, but I was too afraid to face it, too afraid to see the truth. You weren't the only one, I said, my voice steady but heavy. Ryan Sepp's manipulations were good. He Sepp's good at what he does, but you weren't Sepp's the only one deceived. I Sepp's been living with this for months, trying to keep the family together, trying to protect all of us from him. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know how we can fix this, she said, her voice breaking. Everything feels broken. I squeezed her hand gently. We fix it, but it's going to take time. We can rush it. We have to rebuild this, our trust, our family. It won't be easy, but we can do it. There was a long silence between us, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that spoke of understanding, of the pain we both felt, but also the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. Later that week, we sat down with the rest of the family to explain what had happened. We had to clear the air to show them the truth behind Ryan's lies. Lisa spoke first, her voice soft but resolute, as she explained the situation to her parents and siblings. It was difficult. No one wants to believe that someone they love could be so deceitful, so manipulative. But as Lisa recounted everything piece by piece, I could see the weight of the truth hitting them. I had no idea, her mother said, her voice shaking. Ryan was always so charming, so convincing. How did we miss this? Because he sets good at what he does, I said, my voice steady but tinged with bitterness. He set's been manipulating all of you, making you think I was the one who was unstable. There was a silence in the room, one heavy with guilt and realization. But it wasn't just guilt. It was anger, too. Anger that Ryan had torn our family apart, and anger that we hadn't seen it sooner. Lisa Seb's father, a strong, stoic man, was the first to speak. I never trusted him, he said, his voice low and firm. I never liked the way he always had something to say about you, Christian, but I never thought he Seb's go this far. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about Ryan manipulating Lisa and me. This was about all of us, about a family torn apart by a lie, by someone who had used us for his own gain, and now it was going to take all of us to heal. We couldn't fix what had been done, but we could try to move forward together. The fallout wasn't just from Ryan's departure. It was the emotional toll it had taken on all of us. Lisa and I were still reeling from the impact of the betrayal, and while we had moments of closeness, there were also moments of silence. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. Trust had been shattered, and though it could be rebuilt, it would never be the same. Ryan's actions had consequences that rippled through our lives, through our relationships, through our family. He had made us doubt everything we had built together, made us question ourselves, and even now, as I sat there with my family, I realized that the road ahead would be long. But I also realized something else. Justice had been served. The truth had come to light, and while that didn't take away the pain, it gave me something more powerful. Peace. The emotional toll had been immense, but there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that I had fought for the truth, and in the end the truth had won. Ryan may have taken a lot from me, from us, but he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken my dignity, my integrity, and as for Lisa, we still had a long road ahead. But I knew one thing for sure, we would get through this together. The days after Christmas Eve passed slowly, like the air after a storm, thick with anticipation, uncertainty, and quiet. Ryan was gone, completely. His things had been packed up, his presence erased from the house, but the damage he'd done lingered, hanging like a shadow over every room, every conversation. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about the lies. It was about the slow, painstaking work of reclaiming our lives, reclaiming what he had stolen. Lisa and I had our good days and bad. On the good days, we'd talk, really talk about everything, about the past, about the future, about what we could salvage from the wreckage Ryan had left behind. But on the bad days, the silence would stretch, and it felt like we were strangers, unsure of how to find our way back to each other. There was no quick fix, no simple solution, but there was something even more powerful than that time. Slowly we began to rebuild. Slowly trust started to return, piece by piece, like a shattered vase being mended with invisible glue. But even as we worked through our pain, the reality was that justice had been served. I had exposed the truth, and while that had cost me, cost both of us, there was an undeniable sense of peace that had come with it. I knew deep down that the truth had been the right path to take. Ryan was facing the consequences of his actions, and I had finally cleared my name. The letters from the lawyer had arrived a week ago, documents that made everything official, legal. The accusations he had made against me were dismissed, and while no one would ever be able to truly undo the damage he had caused, the weight of those false accusations was finally lifted from my shoulders. I was free. But freedom didn't feel the way I imagined it would. There was no immediate sense of relief. There was no sense of victory in this kind of justice. It wasn't the kind of justice you celebrate with a glass of wine or a round of applause. No, this kind of justice was quieter, slower. It was the kind that gave you peace, but left behind the scars that would take years to heal. Lisa and I sat in the living room one evening, the weight of everything still hanging in the air. The house felt different, quieter, but this time it felt like the silence was ours, not something imposed on us by Ryan's manipulation. "I think we're starting to move forward," Lisa said softly, her eyes fixed on the fire crackling in the hearth. I nodded, but the words didn't yet come easily. "Yeah, we are," I finally said, though it felt like something more still lingered between us, something unresolved. "But it's not going to happen overnight. We still need time to really heal, to trust each other again." She turned to me then, her eyes searching mine. "Do you really think we can? Do you think we shall ever be the same?" The question hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I didn't have an answer, not one that would make everything better. What had happened wasn't something we could just forget, but the truth had brought us one step closer to healing, and that was all we could do, move forward, one step at a time. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice hoarse, "but I know we can try. We can build something new, something stronger. but it's not going to be easy. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. Ryan had been served with legal papers, not just the dismissal of the accusations against me, but also a lawsuit for defamation. It wasn't the most satisfying thing. I didn't want to destroy him the way he had tried to destroy me. But the truth was, I had to protect myself. Protect my name, my family. "Do you feel better?" Lisa asked, sitting beside me as I hung up the phone. I didn't know how to answer. Was there closure? Was there a way to fix what had been broken? "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I don't know if that if is the right word. I just know that I fought for the truth, and I done what I had to do to protect us. That's all I can do." There was a long pause before Lisa spoke again. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't exposed everything. If you had just stayed quiet and let him win." "I couldn't I said, my voice tight. "I couldn't let him take everything from me, from us." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something like understanding in her gaze. "I know," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet settle in again. The victory wasn't glamorous. There was no celebration, no grand moment where everything felt right again. But as I looked around at the familiar, worn faces of my family, I realized something: we had made it through. We had fought through the storm, and we were still standing. And maybe that was justice after all. The days following Ryan's departure were quieter, but not peaceful. The house, which had once been filled with laughter, now felt hollow, like a memory that had been long forgotten. The silence between Lisa and me was heavy with unspoken words, with the kind of pain that didn't disappear just because the culprit had been exposed. I spent a lot of time alone in the evenings, staring out the window at the world outside, watching the world move while I was stuck, caught in the aftermath. I had finally gotten what I wanted: justice, the truth out in the open, but there was no satisfaction in it. There was no victory dance, no feeling of triumph. The damage had been done, and no amount of truth could undo that. Lisa and I would talk sometimes, but not about what had happened. We talked about the weather, about what we were going to eat for dinner, about anything that didn't touch the real issue. But even in those casual conversations, I could feel the distance. The walls between us, though invisible, were real. They were the result of months of manipulation, of doubt, and of betrayal. It was going to take more than time to tear those down. I found myself thinking about the words Ryan had said when he first accused me of being unstable. They still haunted me. Those words, "You're unstable," a casual, offhand comment that had shattered everything. And yet, despite the devastation they caused, those words weren't what hurt the most anymore. What hurt the most was the realization that Lisa had believed them, even for just a moment. That was what had cut deepest. Because in the end, it wasn't about the accusations. It was about the trust we had lost. I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led up to that moment. The years of quiet, unnoticed strain in my marriage. The slow erosion of respect between Lisa and me. Ryan had been the catalyst, the spark. But there was more to it than that. Our marriage, our family, had been fractured long before he ever made his move. I thought back to the moments when I had felt something was wrong but had brushed them aside, too busy with my own life, with my own stability, to see it. I'd been so focused on being the strong one, the dependable one, that I'd failed to notice the cracks forming beneath the surface. And by the time I saw them, it was too late. I sat down one evening after dinner when the house had quieted, and the weight of everything was finally beginning to sink in. I looked across the room at Lisa, who was sitting on the couch, reading a book. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, no animosity. But there was still a quiet sorrow, a sadness that matched my own. We hadn't fixed anything. Not really. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice low, uncertain. "About everything. About us. About what happened. And I realized something." Lisa looked up from her book, her expression guarded. "I think we both got lost somewhere along the way," I said, letting the words settle between us. "We got so caught up in the fight that we forgot why we were fighting in the first place. We forgot what we were protecting." Lisa set her book down, her eyes softening. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, rubbing my hand over my face, "we were both so focused on what was happening outside of us. Ryan, the accusations, Everything that we didn't stop to ask ourselves what we really wanted. We didn't stop to ask what was worth fighting for. There was a long silence as she looked at me, and I could see the gears turning in her head. "Do you think we can fix this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'd admit no, I admitted, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. But I know this, whatever happens, I once said stop fighting for us, for this family. But we both have to fight. It can set just be one person trying to rebuild it all. Lisa nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something shift between us. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't some miraculous healing. But it was something, a small opening, a crack in the wall between us. It was a start. I had spent so much time focusing on getting justice, on exposing the truth, that I had forgotten something essential. Truth alone doesn't heal. Justice doesn't fix everything. It's only a part of it. What I needed was something deeper, something more profound than a courtroom victory or an exposed lie. I needed to rebuild trust, rebuild the love that had once been the foundation of everything Lisa and I had. I needed to find my way back to the man I used to be, the man she used to love before everything got tangled up in Ryan's lies. And so the journey began, not toward justice anymore, but toward healing. I couldn't promise Lisa that everything would be perfect, that it would be easy, but I could promise her that I wouldn't give up, that I would keep fighting, not for the truth or for some grand victory, but for us. I looked at her then, and in that moment I saw the woman I had married again, the one who had stood by me through everything, even when the world seemed like it was falling apart. It wasn't over, our fight wasn't over, but we were still standing. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Time moved slowly, but it did move. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months, and with each passing day the house felt a little more like home again. The cracks that had once felt so sharp were starting to soften, but the scars, the ones Ryan had left, were still there, still visible, still painful when touched. Lisa and I worked together, slowly, carefully, like we were trying to rebuild something that had been shattered but could never quite return to its original form. I didn't expect miracles. There was no magic wand to wave that would fix everything. There were no quick fixes for the damage Ryan had done, but we were trying, and trying, for us, was enough. It wasn't just about rebuilding trust. It was about rediscovering who we were in the rubble of everything that had happened. We spent time together, quiet evenings, long talks, and little by little I saw the old Lisa again, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant. There were still moments of doubt, still moments where I caught a shadow in her eyes, a fleeting hesitation, but it was fading bit by bit. But just as we were starting to find our rhythm again, something unexpected happened. I got a call from my lawyer one afternoon. The legal papers regarding Ryan had been processed, and while the lawsuit for defamation had been settled, there was one more matter. Ryan, it seemed, wasn't as done as I thought. He had filed an appeal, not just in response to the defamation lawsuit, but in an attempt to get the records sealed. He was trying to cover his tracks. At first, the thought of facing him again, even through legal channels, brought up a surge of anger. I had been ready to leave it all behind, to move forward with my life. But Ryan wasn't done with me, and that meant I wasn't done with him either. "How do you want to proceed?" my lawyer asked, his voice steady as always. I sat there in my office, staring out the window. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about all the hurt, all the lies, and the weight that Ryan had placed on us. And for the first time in months, I realized something. Ryan had taken so much from us, not just in terms of reputation or family dynamics, but in our peace. He had stolen that from us. "I'm not going to let him win," I said finally, my voice firm. The lawyer nodded. "We shall move forward then. We shall fight the appeal." It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about winning in any traditional sense. It was about one thing. I wasn't going to let him erase the truth. I wasn't going to let him manipulate the story, rewrite history, or make it seem like he was the victim in all of this. Ryan had started this, but I was going to finish it. Lisa and I talked about it later that night, after dinner, as we sat on the porch. She looked tired, but there was a strength in her that hadn't been there before. I could see it in the way she held herself now, in the way she listened when I spoke, in the way she was present with me. And for the first time, I realized that while we would never be the same as we were before, we could be something different, a stronger version of ourselves. I don't want to keep living in the past, Lisa said quietly, her voice steady but soft. But I can now let Ryan win. Not like this. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. I agree, I said. This is about more than just clearing my name. It's SEP's about our future. It's SEP's about making sure we never let anyone tear us apart again. We didn't talk much after that. The weight of the decision we'd made hung in the air, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of finality. Ryan had already cost us so much, but he wasn't going to take anything else from us. Not our peace, not our future. We moved forward with the legal battle, pushing back against Ryan's attempt to silence the truth. It was hard, far harder than I expected, but the further we went, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the past. It was about taking control of the present, about showing up every day and choosing to fight for what mattered. It wasn't easy, it wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. In the months that followed, the appeal was denied, and Ryan was forced to face the consequences of his actions. He would never get back the control he once had. And as much as I wanted to say I felt triumphant, the truth was, I felt nothing but exhaustion. The fight had taken everything, and in the end, the only thing I could do was keep moving forward, keep living, and keep healing. Lisa and I started to make new memories, ones that didn't carry the weight of the past with them. The old joys started to creep back into our lives, the laughter, the comfort of being in each other's company without fear or doubt. We weren't fixed, not by any means, but we were healing, and that for me was enough. I thought the worst of it was over. I thought the legal battles, the emotional weight, the fights for truth and clarity, those had been the hardest things I'd face. But as the months dragged on, I began to realize something unsettling. The cycle of conflict didn't stop just because we had won. It never truly ended. Lisa and I were moving forward, but the scars from everything that had happened, Ryan's betrayal, the false accusations, the subsequent unraveling of everything we had built, were not easily healed. We were trying, but the tension was always there, just beneath the surface. The doubt Ryan had sown was still there, in our quiet moments, in the nights when Lisa would turn over in bed and stare at the ceiling, as if she were searching for answers to questions we couldn't yet ask. I couldn't tell if we were really healing or just existing, trying to ignore the cracks in our foundation, but we were pushing forward, step by step. Then, one day, I received an unexpected call. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and I almost didn't pick it up, but something told me I should. Mr. Garcia, the voice on the other end, said, "This is Detective Williams from the San Diego Police Department. I said, I'm afraid I have some information you might want to hear." My stomach dropped. For a moment I thought maybe this was some sort of mistake, but as soon as the detective spoke again, I realized that I wasn't prepared for what was coming. "We've recently been investigating some of Ryan's financial transactions," Detective Williams continued. "It seems that while he was manipulating your family, he was also lining his own pockets. We have evidence that he was using your name to funnel money from various sources without your knowledge, of course. But it's clear that his manipulation of your family was just the beginning of his scheme." I sat back in my chair, stunned. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted once more. I had already dealt with the emotional devastation he had caused, but now I was learning that there was something more, something deeper. This wasn't just about family betrayal. This was about a man who had used his position to exploit me, to manipulate my family, and to profit from it. "And what exactly are you saying?" I managed to ask, still trying to process everything. "We're going to need your help," Detective Williams said. "We're investigating fraud, embezzlement, and potential money laundering. Ryan's been using the connections he made through your family to steal from various people, including you. He's been hiding his tracks well, but we've got enough now to bring him in. He's already under suspicion for multiple other crimes, and your case will just add to it." The news hit me harder than I ever expected. This wasn't just a matter of clearing my name anymore. This wasn't about exposing his lies in front of our family. It was bigger than that. Ryan had manipulated us, but now he had gone even further. He had used us as pawns in a game of deceit and theft. The detective continued explaining the legal ramifications, the next steps in their investigation. But as I sat there listening to his voice, I realized something I hadn't expected. This was the final twist. The irony of it all struck me. Ryan had tried to destroy me, tried to ruin my reputation, my marriage, my life, and in the end he had only destroyed himself. His lies, his manipulations, his thirst for control had led him to his own downfall. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the justice I had been waiting for. It wasn't the public exposure, the courtroom victory, or the emotional showdown that had ultimately mattered. No, it was the truth. The truth had a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how hard someone tried to bury it. Ryan thought he could take everything from me, but in the end he had only taken himself down. The very thing he tried to use against me, his lies, his manipulations, had become his undoing. Later that evening, I sat down with Lisa to tell her everything. She listened in silence as I explained the phone call, the investigation. She didn't say much, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just processing what I was saying. She was reflecting on everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the emotional toll. She was seeing once again just how much Ryan had stolen from us. But this time she wasn't just angry at him. She was angry for us, for everything we had been through, for everything he had done to our family. "It'll never be the same," she said quietly, her voice raw, "but maybe, just maybe, we'll be better for it." I nodded. I wasn't sure I agreed with her. Not fully, but there was something in her words that resonated. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way for us to move forward from all of this. Not without scars, not without loss, but with strength. The final twist, the irony of it all, was this. Ryan had thought he could destroy me, but in the end he had destroyed himself. And while we would never be the same, while the damage he had caused couldn't just be erased, there was a strange peace in knowing that the truth had outlasted his lies, that in the end justice had a way of righting itself. And for once, I was ready to stop looking back,